The Male Couple, How Relationships Develop, David P. McWhirter, MD, Andrew M. Mattison, MSW, PhD. Chapter 8, Stage 6, Renewing. Beyond 20 years. Characteristics: 1. Achieving security. 2. Shifting perspectives. 3. Restoring the partnership. 4. Remembering. One of the important things that's happened in the past few years seems to be some kind of rejuvenation, like we've had a new look at each other and decided that we weren't such a bad choice after all. Ted squints as the setting sun's last rays bounce off the glass coffee table between us. Ted and Phil were introduced in the first chapter, two school teachers, together for 33 years. Ted is 57 and Phil is 56. They had met in 1944 in Europe when they were both in the Army. Ted was born and reared in Northern California, where his father had a management job with a stove manufacturing company. He had an older sister and a younger brother. He started working in the company plant right out of high school. It was 1938 when I graduated from high school. Let me tell you, things were mighty tough in those Depression days. I wanted to go to college, but Dad insisted that I work for a while. After 2 years of putting away some money, I went to San Jose State College for 2 years and then got drafted in 1942. I think I was 22 then. I took their tests, and before I knew what happened, I was in officers' candidate school. I hated the infantry, but had some damned patriotic ideas. I remember Pearl Harbor so clearly, that terrible Sunday morning in December of 1941. Ted digresses often in the interview to fill me in on side details, bits of history that he wants to include, just as if he is teaching a class. Phil was born in Central Texas, and even though he hasn't lived there since 1942, there is still a slight detectable drawl and an occasional, sure enough, to remind the interviewer of his origins. Phil's father was a sheriff. Something like Matt Dillon in that old TV show Gunsmoke, Phil says, except not that far back and not so glamorous. Taking up the thread of his history once again, Phil continues, I finished high school when I was 17. I really loved school. I got excited about music, especially opera. I remember the first opera I ever saw was in Dallas, Lily Pons singing Lucia de Lammermoor. It was a long time before I saw the next one. That was in London in 1943 at Covent Garden, La Bohème. Phil worked on his uncle's farm, managing the cotton pickers and other hired hands because there just wasn't enough money for college. I played the piano, he says. I guess I was a little too queer for my father's taste. He was always writing me about playing ball and dating girls, neither of which I was doing. I knew I was interested in other men, but felt really terrible about it. It was Ted who got me out of that. When I saw him, I was in love forever, as far as I was concerned. Fortunately, it seems to have been the same for him. Don't get me wrong. We have our ups and downs. Both men were discharged from the service at around the same time in 1945. They each visited the other's homes after arriving back stateside at different times. We didn't want to be separated, and I knew I didn't want to go back to Texas. Phil fills in some of the missing details. California was offering some of the best veterans benefits and had the best college programs for getting teacher credentials. We both saw the growth potential out here. When we were visiting Ted's folks in Newark, we bought a 1942 Plymouth Coupe and drove down all along the California coast all the way to Tijuana. Yep, you guessed it. When we drove into San Diego in February of 1946, we looked at each other, and just like Brigham Young, we both said, this is the place. To shorten a much longer story, we came back here in the summer and started the fall semester at San Diego State. We had our first home together, a little apartment out near the campus. In those days, it was mostly fields and sage bushes on the mesas. I got a job with the city just after I finished, and Phil got one a year later, even before he finished his degree. We both got master's degrees later on. We loved each other. Looking back, it all seems wonderful. But actually, there were some terrible times. Like the first time I got VD and brought it home to him. Ted chuckles now as the twinkle in his eye lets the interviewer know that was an old problem. Ted and Phil had built their own home on a beautiful acre of land in a San Diego suburb in the mid-1960s. Before that, they had owned a home together closer to the downtown area. They have other real estate holdings and marvelous collections of paintings and statues in their modern house. They had built a guest house on their property for Phil's mom after his dad died. She lived there until her death a year before our interview. We never talked to Mom about our relationship. The families never questioned us or mentioned it, yet after the first few years, we were always included in everything on both sides. They just never think of two men like us having a sexual relationship. It isn't part of their world. Phil is telling us more about the gay side of their lives. We have a lot of friends, mostly man-woman couples that we visit and entertain. We never been very big on gay life, although Ted would love to get out there and be more actively involved. I don't like the idea. I'm content just to hold back. I remember how scared we got with that Proposition 6 deal. If that thing had passed, it would really have upset our apple cart. We sent some money in, but were afraid to do more. Proposition 6 was an initiative on the California state ballot in 1978, making it illegal for homosexual people or even those supportive of homosexual people to teach in public schools. The measure was soundly defeated, but there was a very heated debate over it for many months. We both could retire from teaching, but then what would we do? We've invested wisely and have plenty of money and property to keep us going for years. As important as money is to us, some things are more valuable. I'm having some trouble with high blood pressure, and Phil's arthritis kicks up. We just aren't getting any younger, Ted says. Achieving security. When couples talk about security, they refer to financial, personal, and relationship well-being. Almost all of the couples in this stage have reached a moderate or high level of financial comfort with retirement funds, investments, real estate, and other incomes. Dual career couples combining their incomes and other resources for more than 20 years, usually without dependents, do achieve financial security, or at least see its achievement in the near future. The collaboration and productivity of Stage 4 and the complete merger of money in Stage 5 generally result in accumulations that account for those with combined incomes of more than $50,000 yearly. Alan and Ken are a good case in point. They will be discussed as individuals in Chapter 11 and a couple in Chapter 12. They are both very wealthy men by any standard and have accumulated the bulk of their wealth by working together for the last 20 years. We planned it after our first year together. Alan was the smart guy, and I provided more of the brawn, Ken tells us. But Alan interrupts. That's not exactly right. If it hadn't been for your steady hand and heart at times, I wouldn't have blown the whole show. You always come through in a pinch. Most couples who have been together more than 20 years have a feeling of permanence in their relationships that provides the security of companionship and the lack of loneliness. Most of us fear loneliness as we grow older, haunted by the movie and TV images of old men and women abandoned in sleazy rest homes or other less than desirable retirement settings. These couples who have retired are usually very busy with things they had planned before retiring. I know it sounds a little corny, but it really is true that I've been far busier since I retired than when I was still employed. I've finally been able to take on a lot more responsibility with the symphony, and now there is time for the garden. I enjoy it so much that I hardly know when to quit. I'm on the phone more often than I would like with someone somewhere about my old work. This man is a retired university physics professor with several textbooks to his credit. The feelings about the importance of security seem strongest in couples in the latter part of stage 6. These men are usually older with a stronger need for security. I would know what to do without Paul, says Fred, referring to his sense of security with his lover of 46 years. I thank my lucky stars every night for his persistence in sticking with me. 72-year-old Fred is referring to how he had tried to chase Paul off when he was pursuing him so insistently almost 50 years earlier. I feel like what we now have together is like a return on the investment we've made in each other and in our relationship over all these years. We're reaping the profits from what we did and collected. The good Lord has been watching over us and still is. Paul feels the same way as Fred does about their mutual security. Men talk about the challenge of their goals, then the absence of the challenge once the goals are achieved. We have nothing to drive for like we used to. Having the carrot out in front kept both of us in harness. Some couples establish new goals, such as collecting art or antiques. One couple is dedicated to developing a retirement community for other gay people. In the few instances in which couples have not attained at least some of their goals, there is some degree of estrangement and evidence of unresolved conflict. Achieving security produces strong feelings of well-being in the couple, feelings they recall from stage 1's blending and limerence. The difference, however, is that the early feelings were built on expectations, and the renewing experience is built on the reality of themselves and their shared history together. Shifting perspectives. One of the very best examples we have found of how couples' perspectives change was provided for by the last couple quoted above. Just last month, we had to rush down to the bank on the 15th to prevent one of our 6-year investment notes from rolling over. Fred is talking. Because if you don't get to the bank on the very day of maturation, the money is automatically reinvested for 6 more years. When you're our age, 6 years is a really long time. We may not be here in 6 months, let alone 6 years. Even when we first bought those notes, 6 years didn't seem like long. Now I really can't expect to live that long. As we get older, life gets shorter. It is just that simple. But not all of us can face it in quite the same simple way. Besides concerns of life expectancy, men in stage 6 express shifts in many other concerns. They talk about health problems, growing old, fear of their lover's death, fear of loneliness, and concern about their attractiveness to others. Some deal with these concerns by withdrawal into the self, being depressed and isolated, while others rush out to confront them actively. Many exercise regularly and frequently, playing tennis, swimming, jogging, or going to a spa or gym. Others are diet watchers, worrying about cholesterol and blood pressure. Too much red meat and alcohol. Others have dealt with health concerns by denial. These men deal with the fear of aging in the same sensible and foolish ways that all people do. Some give in to the aches and pains of aging, while some appear to age with grace and tranquility, being even more attractive than in younger days. Others have their facelifts and eye tucks and dye their hair. Pride makes it difficult to discuss all concerns as one grows old, yet there seems to be a need to tell. Harold tells us, I used to run down those steps and now I take hold of the handrail. I don't use the bike anymore because of the arthritis in my knee. I do still walk downtown, but I take the bus back because it's a little uphill. We see the look of concern on Harold's face when Sam repeats the same humorous anecdote just a few minutes after its first telling. We have to rely on our guess that Harold worries about Sam's memory lapses as signs of gradual deterioration. There are poignant references to future loss. We have to use those 6-month investment things because we don't know if we have 5 years. Our old friend Robert passed last week, and now Russell is sick. Well, that's for the future, and that's God's worry, not ours. We just try to stay well. Sex used to be such a big deal. I guess it still is in a way as long as it stays. Learning that this disease is degenerative was the most depressing. Russ is 59 and blind, and Peter is 58. They have been together for 31 years. Russ had gradually lost his vision from progressive glaucoma 3 years earlier. Russ says, I need Peter now more than ever, not so much because I can't see, but because I love him more. Peter's rejoinder is, an important thing for me all my life has been a need to be needed. Russ has needed me more since his illness. The satisfaction I have gotten from that fact alone has been as great as anything in my life. We're closer now than ever. Russ doesn't really need me because he's blind. He could function very adequately without my eyes. But the real truth is that I need him as much as he needs me. The emergence of these personal concerns can bring the partners closer together and contribute to repartnering, or it can increase distancing. If the communication between partners is open and they have been able to share their feelings, each realizes he is not alone. On the other hand, if they are not communicating, feelings of isolation are almost assured. The most difficult anticipated loss, of course, is death of the partner. Harold says, when one of us goes, it will be all over. Oh, the other one will hang on until he's taken too, but it will be just a matter of waiting. Some couples tell us they welcome the seclusion that retirement provided because it was voluntarily chosen by them. On the other hand, there are couples where one partner sees retirement as a voluntary seclusion while the other sees it as an enforced solitude when he longs for social contact with others. In these couples, one partner has become more isolated and the other expresses his concern for the withdrawal. We usually can identify some depression in the individuals. The new butcher might take the order without looking at them. They feel literally unrecognized. Perhaps even the partner responds in such a habitual manner that he hardly seems to notice the other's presence. While these changes are not limited to male couples, there are some changes that are specific to our population. These are men who have appreciatively noticed and been noticed by other men. These are men who have appreciatively noticed and been noticed by other men. Attraction between men have played an important role in life satisfaction. In stage 6, some men speak with feeling about being ignored by younger gays. Those youngsters get it all on a silver platter and have no appreciation for how we survive at their age. Those youngsters get it all on a silver platter and have no appreciation for how we survived at their age. We could teach them a thing or two, but they look right through us. At times, it is the younger men excluding the stage 6 couples. At times, it is these older couples dismissing the youngsters. But there is sometimes a tension between the generations. One of the positive features of shifting perspectives is found among couples who talk about their relationship representing a place of retreat, like an oasis in the desert where they could stop for refreshment and linger in the quiet shade together for days on end. We take refuge in each other because it's so well known and so secure. Restoring the partnership, like a marvelous old Victorian house that has passed through years of neglect. Some relationships need mending and restoring. Others have been tended to with great caution all along. We've been with each other more than half our lives. I can hardly remember it being otherwise. George is recalling his 35 years with Jerry. Both men are still working, although Jerry tried retiring and found he couldn't stand it. They have a beautiful home, small, neatly kept, and stylishly furnished. We've fought often and hard over the years, but mostly when we get mad at each other, we both pout and shut up, Jerry says. George continues, Jerry developed high blood pressure a few years back. I got real concerned about him and then about myself. We had to stop and realize we're not spring chickens anymore. I made him promise to go easier. We started working less, taking some trips together, just being better to ourselves and to each other. Not all of these couples are aged. Some are in their late 40s and 50s. 22 years seemed like a long time to be with the same man, Ron says. Some years back, Doug and I got into such a fight that he moved into his own room, and we just existed together, not too comfortably, for a few years. There was a time when we didn't even talk to each other for 6 months. Doug had his life and friends, and I had mine. Gradually, we slipped into living together as roommates. Although we did do some things together, we stopped any attempt at sex or even being affectionate. Then, about 2 years ago, Doug told me he was planning on retiring from his job as a salesman. He was 45 and I was 43. I began to think about all the plans we had made years ago about retiring about this time. Actually, we had put our money in good investments. When I looked the whole situation over, I could see my way to retiring too. But what would it be like if he and I weren't together? Doug is the quiet one in our relationship, so I decided to take things into my own hands. I told him I was taking him away for the weekend. I reserved a little hideaway in Palm Springs, and we talked the entire weekend, the first time in almost 5 years. It was the beginning of a whole new life for us. If couples have not learned to communicate with each other earlier in their lives together, it rarely starts happening in this stage. If, however, somewhere in their story they remember a time of close communication, it can be restored by effort. More often than not, the advent of a crisis, personal or otherwise, the couple can pull themselves together and breathe new life into their partnership. When Russ came back from the doctor's office that morning, I knew something was wrong. Peter is telling us how we learned about Russ's impending blindness. He had been complaining about needing new glasses for months. So I stopped paying any attention to him. I hadn't even considered the possibility of something as bad as it was. Russ's vision deteriorated rapidly, and the couple faced the problem together. I was depressed and scared at first, feeling like life was over and I just wanted to die, Russ tells his side. Peter jumped into my life with new energy and wouldn't give me a chance to get down. He told me I had to learn to read Braille, and we had to set the house up so that I knew where things were. Almost from the start of my visual failure, he insisted that I use a blindfold and learn my way around the house, the garden, and everything. Yeah, we got so busy preparing for it that neither of us had much time to think. I started using the blindfold around the house too, so that I knew what it was like. We would keep the lights out at night. We marked all our stereo albums so we could read them with our fingers. Peter tells us, we tried to see it as a new challenge. We weren't going to let it get us down. Peter felt I really needed him, like in the old days, I guess. And you know, I did need him. We've slept together every night since, haven't we, Peter? Russ asks. Couples together for more than 20 years tell many stories of changes in their relationships. As we age, maintaining flexibility is one of the secrets of continuing vitality. Yet changing becomes progressively more difficult as we get older. Rejuvenation of relationships depends on many factors, but change can be a key to it. Functional complementation becomes less flexible and reversible with these couples, but emotional complementarity continues to be interchangeable. I can take care of him just like a child, but he can do it for me too. That's a nice thing about our relationship. What might be responsible for the restoration of partnerships at this time in life? The habit of being together helps keep them together, but does not always assist with improving the quality. Self-appraisal and a new look at the partner sometimes starts the ball rolling. With couples who have a positive history, especially those who have faced some serious adversity earlier, restoration is easier. When we ask Albert and Jacob about the most difficult thing they had faced together, they both answered immediately and without hesitation that the 3-year enforced separation during World War II was the most difficult experience they had endured. Jacob says, he wanted everything to be exactly the same when he came home, so I worked my tail off getting the apartment set up as close to the original as possible. I was so nervous when I went down to the train station. You'll never be able to imagine my shock when I saw him. He was 50 pounds heavier and almost 4 years older, and he didn't want anything to be changed. I sent a boy off to war, and here he came back a great big man. Albert adds his observations. In those first few weeks, we went from the highest peaks to the lowest depths. We really rode the roller coaster for a while. If we got through that, we can get through anything. Jacob gives us more insight into his feelings about Albert. I still get down on my knees every night and thank God for giving me Albert. I also think about whether I have told him everything I want him to know. Because I don't sleep well if something has gone unsaid. I might not live till tomorrow. I think there was a new awakening for us when we sold the ranch and moved back into town. Albert recalls what what had happened a decade earlier. It was definitely a different phase in our lives. We started homemaking all over again. We decorated and planned together like newlyweds. Sometimes there is a quality of romance in the repartnering that is a little redolent of limerence. Some couples know how to regain a flash of high romance now and then. One couple tells of a trip they took down the Nile 2 years ago. Amidst the exotic and ancient surroundings, they experienced a return of feelings for each other they had not had in years. They speak of their mutual awkwardness in dealing with them. Another couple describes a serious financial crisis that forced them into clinging together and rejoining forces against this outside threat to their security in a way that intensified their emotional bonding. As noted with Russ and Peter, illness in one partner can precipitate reexamination and repartnering. Couples in other stages can be affected similarly, but it just seems to happen more with couples in stage 6. Remembering. These people reminisce a lot. They tell anecdote after anecdote about the past, checking with each other about this recalled fact or that remembered date and name, sharing their long relationship history, rich in memories, is clearly pleasurable. These couples are storytellers. In telling the stories, they are able to relive the events. Sometimes one partner corrects a detail, adds a bit of remembered dialogue, or smiles and nods agreement. It is oral history being passed along the generation chain. They seek out willing audiences, usually younger people, as grandparents might do. They have lessons to teach. They want others to profit from their experience. Again and again, the message in the story seems to be, don't expect it to be easy, but remember to take care of each other and find out if this relationship is the real thing. They muse about how it would be to be starting again together now. We really needed each other so much back then. We learned more than once. Like tolerant elders, they might listen to the stories of younger people and say, well, maybe you need to be single for a while and then find the right person. So often the gift they seem eager to give is the knowledge that the two men can love each other and support each other through good and bad times for many years. They want it known that male couples have existed always, that it takes willingness and effort, and that the reward is great. There is the natural human desire to have younger people learn from one's own errors. Stage 6 couples remark again and again on how different times are today. Harold says, it's easy to go from one relationship to another nowadays. Maybe it's too easy, but maybe it's good. Who knows if Sam and I would be together now if we had started out in times like this? Who knows what's best? It's different, that's for sure. And now, just like 30 years ago, we fellows are getting together anyway and doing it our own way because it's our nature and we need to. We'll always find a way, I guess. He continues, patting Sam on the leg. Maybe the rest of the world will learn from watching us now. They could do what they need to do, too. You know, last week the man and woman next door were asking us advice about their daughter and the young man she's living with. It's new for them, but old for us. Many of the couples in stage 6 make observations about time passing quickly or slowly. Some feel their mutual perceptions about the passage of remaining time bring them closer together. Some seem sad about time passing. Some are challenged. It is easy to get these couples to talk for a long time about their past. They talk with each other in our presence as if we were not there, recalling events, persons, and other memories. It is this shared past, ultimately, that seems their most prized possession and the intangible that offers security and peace. There seems to be a desire to pass on the folklore and wisdom. There are money, possessions, security, and time. There is the desire to use all of this in some useful way. Some stage 6 couples find it too difficult to adapt quickly to the new world available to male couples. Others plunge in, joining organizations and finding willing offspring who value them and want to listen. It seems like we have sons, and I guess before we know it, we'll have to call new ones grandsons, and it's not a one-way street. You don't think we did all this gardening, do you? Sam is referring to the younger gay couple who come every week to tend the garden and have dinner with them. One stage 6 couple who had built their own home built a new home on the lot next to theirs. We talked it over and decided we should make it more than an investment of money. So when we rented the old place, we looked for the younger gays who were settled with each other and would want to visit back and forth. We usually see them 2 or 3 times a week for dinner or lunch. I know my sister doesn't have anything that good with her kids. There seems to be a strong reaction to any hint of being patronized. Any of the waiters in that restaurant are so cute. All of the waiters in that restaurant are so cute and talk kind of seductively, Sam says, but some of them are too stuck on themselves. I reached out to touch one just like I would with anybody, and he jumped like I had fire in my fingers. I said, "Young man, I am more interested in getting my steak than your buns." Hell, who does he think he is? And what makes him think I'd be interested in him? Years count for something too, you know. Nobody should be pushed aside because they're older or younger. It's what's inside that counts. Commentary. This has been the most difficult stage for us to examine. It is the one about which we seem to know the least, yet it has fascinated us mainly because the couples we have met who have long relationship histories. The world believes that homosexual men have a lonely and isolated old age. These data discount that old belief. Although some men are isolated and even lonely, it is not the rule for most. Among the common problems of this stage, we do see some depression from a variety of causes: illness, death of family or friends, feelings of being excluded, and similar occurrences. During the stage, the problems tend to shift from the relationship back to the individual. Sometimes poor management of past stage characteristics causes problems. Some couples still have not learned to deal with conflict effectively and establish a truce or moratorium that breaks down over minor points, causing each to compartmentalize. The rigidity of aging can block compromise and cause people to undo some previous characteristics, like trying to separate their finances again. Like stage 2 couples trying to avoid conflict, some stage 6 couples have come full circle and are trying again to avoid conflict at all costs. We found an increased dependency, as if the reappearance of the individual in stage 3 and the hard-won independence of stage 4 have been dissolved in the renewed dependency of stage 6. This seems natural and expected. Couples start out together by losing themselves in the blending of their individual personalities in stage 1. The continuation of their partnership over time depended upon their ability to separate and find themselves individually without abandoning the relationship. The balancing act of togetherness needed complementarity and independence, conflict and resolution, constriction and restoration. In these later years, there is a return to the need for togetherness that gets expressed in their renewing. As we said above, it is not exactly limerence, but men do describe a rejuvenation of their relationship with an emphasis on the pleasures they get from doing things together again, such as traveling, gardening, or cooking. As in stage 1, they spend more time together again in stage 6. We find tenderness and playfulness, as well as feelings of contentment and satisfaction with their years together. Stage 6 holds the reward sought in earlier years. There is a stage beyond the 6 that might rightfully be called surviving. It is a stage in which one is alone again after many years, following the death of a life partner. We have encountered several of these men since our research was concluded. They face unique problems, yet in some ways seem no different from widows or widowers. Relationships were wrenched from their embrace by death, and they are struggling with the solitude while confronted by the happy memories of the past. End of chapter 8.